Hello, it's great to have all of you back with us. We are now on episode 44 of the Gita Decoded, and we are now at chapter 13, which is entitled Yoga of the Distinction Between the Field and the Knower of the Field. Sister Denise is with us in the studio sharing her understanding of the text. Sister Denise, it's great to have you back. Welcome.
Thank you.
So Denise, I'm just going to go into the first stanza, the first shloka, and it contains some Hindi words which are not translated into the Hindi text, and I'd like you to tell the viewer what these words mean and the context in which it is placed. Arjuna said, Prakriti and Purusha, the field and the knower of the field, knowledge and the knower of knowledge. I wish to know about these, Krishna.
In this translation, which is Winthrop Sargent, it's really considered the academic text translation that's used in the Western world. Prakriti is basically matter, and Purush is basically the spirit. But normally speaking, Purush is described as the man or the person, and Prakriti, the body. The spirit knows the material world, and the material world is the field. So I would put it like that. In this case, knowledge is the object, Prakriti, and the knower of knowledge is then Purush. So the whole thing of the relationship between Purush and Prakriti. And it's interesting to note that in the chapters up until now, everything is the omnipresence of God. Everything is God within God, and yet here it's clearly distinguished. So matter and spirit, two completely different things, which I find very interesting because that is also how we work with it in Rajyoga of Brahma Kumaris. There's God, Supreme Purush, then there's Purush, the regular person, and Prakriti, matter, or the body also, Prakriti.
The answer to that question, Denise, that's given in verse 1 reads, the Blessed Lord spoke, this body, Arjuna, is said to be the field, and he who knows this is called the knower of the field by those who are wise in such things.
So that validates it and clarifies what I was saying before. The soul knows the body, and that knowledge is wisdom, to be aware of the difference between I who am and this my body through which I operate.
Sister Denise, when we meet Krishna and Arjuna, they are on a battlefield. Does this title and this chapter refer to that field itself, or does it refer to something else?
In the beginning, you have it called Kurukshetra, Kshetra, the field. And you have also the term Karma Kshetra, the field of action. So the world, the space in which karma occurs. Where it's looking at the knower and the known, it's to do with the soul, who is the knower, and anything that you can perceive through the sense organs belongs to the material world. So that would be Prakriti.
The war, does it come into play in as far as the first two stanzas in this chapter is concerned?
At this point, we're not really talking about the war. We're just distinguishing between the soul, who is the perceiver, and the action that is occurring in the material world, which is the foundation of events. You see, the material world is really Prakriti. But your body is also Prakriti. The knower knows the body, and then anything that is extended from the body in the material world.
I found the next shloka interesting. Know also that I am the knower of the field. In all fields, Arjuna, knowledge of the field and of the knower of the field, that is considered by me to be true knowledge.
Well, it's continuation of the same idea. The soul is the one who has intellect, the organ of becoming aware of something. The knower knows because of having consciousness. And then the field is, again, by extension, the material world. But you can also have the battlefield. Any kind of area in which you work would also be called a field.
Sister Denise, when I go on to the second stanza, God is continuing his conversation with Arjuna, and he says, "Know also that I am the knower of the field. In all fields, Arjuna, knowledge of the field and of the knower of the field, that is considered by me to be true knowledge."
I think here we might want to interpret it that God knows everything that takes place in the material world. Again, it's a continuation of the chapter 11, where God is talking about everything in the material world. So the cycle of time in which the world moves through all of its changes, knowledge of the creation from the beginning, continuation and end, you could say that it is referring to that.
The next shloka that I found interesting was verse 5 that reads, "The great elements, egoism, intellect and the unmanifest, the senses 10 and 1, and the 5 objects of the senses." And then it goes on to other aspects like desire, hatred, pleasure, pain. This briefly is described as the field with its modifications. He's referring to matter here, is he not? And then the subtle aspects that control matter within the human soul.
And when he's mentioning 10, that would be the 10 gates, the 10 orifices of the body, and 1 would be the third eye.
Oh, that's interesting.
I would say, yeah. And then the 5 objects of the senses is anything that you can see, hear, touch, taste, and smell.
From stanza 7 onwards, Sister Denise, the aspect of modifying one's personality, absence of pride, freedom from hypocrisy, non-violence, etc. And again, neutrality in stanza 8 is highlighted again. Non-attachment comes up in stanza 9. And then going on to verse 10, "An unswerving devotion to me with single-minded yoga, frequenting secluded places, distaste for the society of man, etc. This is declared to be true knowledge. Ignorance is what is contrary to this." This chapter, Sister Denise, seems to be God sharing his knowledge with Arjuna of the body and the soul, and then how to manage both and get to him.
Yes, we also see in this that it's really encouraging the idea of sannyas, which is moving away from society, going into solitude, going away from the worldly world in order to be able to stay in remembrance of God. And in Brahmakumaris' form of Raj Yoga, we feel that you ought to be able to have yoga in the middle of everything. It is true that it is easier, more pleasant to meditate in a secluded place with solitude and so on, but you don't always get that, and you have to be careful not to be dependent on physical circumstances in order to be able to meditate effectively. What's being said here is that if you're in the worldly world, then you can't really develop yourself spiritually, and you have to go away from the world. So it's really making a distinction between the worldly world as a very negative place, you can say. And yet what we feel in Brahmakumaris is that, okay, it may be a negative place, but if you meditate there then you're going to bring positive energy into that, and you can actually transform that, because matter in a way is neutral, and it depends on how you, Purusha, interact with it as to whether it's, beneficial or non-beneficial. The main thing is to assert your mastery over the condition of matter.
I see egotism comes up in shloka number 8, and specifically the absence of egotism, which highlights the fact that it's an obstacle in one's spiritual progress, isn't it?
Yes. We use the term soul consciousness and body consciousness in Brahma Kumaris, and we have an expression, Deh Abhiman and Dehi Abhiman. So Deh Abhiman is like pride of the body, arrogance, and Dehi Abhiman refers to something much more subtle, pride of the self as a soul, that which is beyond the body. I think that in this shloka is really looking at egotism in the sense of Deh Abhiman, arrogance of the body. But again, we would say that we need to be able to be in the world without being caught up in body consciousness. Actually, if you look at shloka number 9, you will see that here the person is son, wife, home, and so on. Actually, this is what we practice in Brahma Kumaris, non-attachment in the context of all of these. So that's really very much in line with what we feel.
What you just said about being in the world and meditating in the context of the world rather than away from it is validated or reiterated in stanzas 13 and 14, which reads as follows: having hands and feet everywhere, eyes, heads and faces everywhere, having ears everywhere, that stands enveloping everything in the world. Shining by the function of the senses, yet freed from all the senses, unattached yet maintaining all, free from the qualities yet experiencing the qualities.
Yes, absolutely a perfect description of what I think we want to be, which is also called the lotus life. In the world and not of the world. You are right there, but not affected by it. So that's a very beautiful description, and I think it's going to be very helpful for people who want to practice the knowledge that is given in the Gita, to look at this and see that yes, there you are, the shining being of light, operating through the senses, operating in the world, but not under their influence.
Verse 15 is quite cryptic, and I think it just takes the subject further. Outside and inside beings, those that are moving and not moving, because of its subtlety, this is not comprehended, this is far away and also near. It's very cryptic, isn't it?
Very cryptic, yes.
And the message is?
Well, you have the inner world, which is full of memories and very subtle imprints that are operating, and then in the external world you have the sense perceptions, objects of the senses. Things that are moving means anything material, and things that are not moving means anything non-material. So anything to do with your spirit is, in a sense, not moving in that sense. But
animate and inanimate.
Animate and inanimate,
Okay.
yes, that too. Interesting that it says this is far away and also near. I'm not sure exactly how we're going to work with that.
I thought of truth. Truth. Isn't truth far away, near? Yes, so near. But it's very cryptic.
It
It's
is. You
it's a
can
puzzle.
interpret.
Yes, you can spend hours staring at the stanza and thinking, okay, I see this, no, but it could mean this, and it could mean this.
But that's a very good verse to meditate on, because you really
Yes.
need to adjust your mind to look at it 100 different ways. And I think that by sitting with it and contemplating on it, it would give you insights, and that's really good meditation.
I'm going to go now to verse 17. Also, this is said to be the light of lights that is beyond darkness. It is knowledge, the object of knowledge, and that which is to be attained through knowledge. It is seated in the hearts of all.
So that has to be a reference to self-realization.
Yeah. 18. Thus the field, knowledge, and the object of knowledge have been briefly described. My devotee, understanding this, enters into my state of being. That is a very warm invitation.
Yes, and it reminds us also of other instances where God has mentioned this, that you can enter into my state of being, which has also been qualified as the avyakt state. That means that you are really away from vyakt, which is the bodily state, materialistic state, to being very aware of your spirit, your state of being when you're spiritually awakened, and so that you're in the midst of everything but yet absolutely detached and having the same angle on the material world as God has.
Sister Denise, how would you interpret verse 19? Know that the material nature and spirit are both beginningless. But it says a lot. And it goes on to say, and know also that the modifications of the field and the qualities too arise from material nature.
Yeah, material nature, so Prakruti being in my angle is matter. Matter, as Einstein has told us, cannot be created or destroyed. And that means that it has no beginning. It also means it has no end. So the material world is a continuity, and the spiritual world and the spirit, the soul has no beginning, no end. Souls are neither creatable nor destroyable. They are just there. And what is the change that takes place in the world of matter, from sato to rajo to tamo, the decline in quality, and then God's influence is to transform it from tamo pradhan to sato pradhan. So God is called the purifier, and the soul also passes through change because of its connection with matter. When the soul is in the paramdham, in the Brahmand, there's no change because there's no action, there's no connection with matter. So contact with matter, that means being incarnated in the body, causes both the soul and the body to go through sato pradhan, sato, rajo, tamo, and tamo pradhan stages. So I think this is quite clearly describing this.
I found the introduction of the law of karma in verse 20 interesting. This is how I interpret it, and you must correct me if I'm wrong. Material nature is said to be the cause in the producing of cause and effect. The spirit is said to be the cause in experiencing of pleasure and pain.
Yeah, very interesting.
That was a wow, wasn't it?
Yes, because it's not until the soul is in contact with matter that there is any movement, because the soul is the animating force. As soon as you come into your body, you start breathing and moving around, and therefore there is action, therefore cause and effect. And the experience of the effects of doing action is experienced by the spirit, by the soul, either as pleasure or pain. So it's very interesting that the two are separated like this and brought together like this. So very, very interesting verse. And I think, again, a very important verse to spend some time meditating on.
21, for the spirit abiding, capital S. I want to ask you why capital S just now. Abiding in material nature, experiences the qualities born of material nature, attachment to the qualities is the cause of its birth in good and evil wombs. That's somewhat concerning, the way it's described. Somewhat concerning. Good and evil wombs. I've never heard of a womb as being an evil place to be, because birth is a joyful place. But it's not referring to the womb itself.
Yes,
it's your karma.
Well, no, the womb itself also.
A womb can be evil?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. There goes the miracle of birth. That's shattered that picture from my mind. Okay, but take us through your take on the whole of verse 21. Capital S. Start there, please.
Okay, well, whenever you see spirit with a capital S, I think we're looking at the enlightened person. So that means you're operating from your soul conscious state as opposed to your body conscious state. So I think that's where I would see the capital and the small s. So the enlightened soul is in the body, abiding in material nature, and you experience the processes of passing through change from sato, rajo, tamo. It says here, attachment to the qualities. In reality, what happens when you're connected to a body is you get attached to your body, and you also perform karma through your body. Now, there is a law that says that whatever is your state of mind when you leave the body, that will dictate the kind of birth you will get. So a good womb would be a womb of a mother who is healthy, who is eating well, who is experiencing a good life, not being damaged in any way, not being hurt. The woman who is pregnant is very, very sensitive to whatever's going on around her, and whatever is happening to her is also happening to the unborn child within. And an evil womb would be a mother who is pregnant, who's experiencing maybe abuse, maybe taking in drugs, alcohol, tobacco. These things really are very unpleasant for the fetus who is within. So it's not that the womb is evil, but the experience within the womb of the child is very unpleasant. And so sometimes it has been said that whatever negative karma was performed in the previous birth, you experience the punishment for that in the womb. So that would be experienced as an evil womb. And if you have very light negative karma and very plenty of good karma, your experience in the womb will be very good, and your experience even through the birth canal will be good. You will not have any trauma in the process of birth. So that would be the difference between a good and an evil womb. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does. It does. It does. 22. Very interesting. The highest spirit in this body, also capital S, is called the witness. The witness. The consenter, the supporter, the experiencer, the great Lord, and also the Supreme Spirit. That last line, we're not talking about God, are we?
Actually, yes, you are. But the thing is that God doesn't dwell in the body. According to our understanding, God does not take a birth. if God would take a birth, then God would be going through the same processes as a normal human being. And so I would actually say that there's an inconsistency here. If a person is spiritually aware, then also they are practicing to have the witness consciousness, and they would, this is really a description of a soul, but then when you start saying the Great Lord and the Supreme Spirit, then that refers to the Supreme Soul who doesn't come into a body. So here I would say that, because it's talking about being in the body, that would have to be a soul, because the Supreme Soul is discarnate.
Okay, Sister Denise, I'm going to stop right here because we have reached the end of our half-hour slot. So thank you very, very much. Your take on this and the way you've unpacked this chapter is very different from the way I did, and I'm certain very different from the way the viewer has, because you've got such a different view of things. So thank you so much for that. Okay, so there you have it, chapter 13. If you have heard things today that has not been within your knowledge or experience hitherto, that you've never heard before, do not feel alone. So have I. And Sister Denise has a unique way of looking at things, and that is why the answers that were shared today has come up. Please join us for the next episode, where we will continue to look at the words that is contained in chapter 13 of the Bhagavad Gita. Thank you so much for joining us, and goodbye.